Coming to Canada, The Adventures of a Thai Businessman. Starring Paknan. Paknan is a recent university graduate who wanted to pursue a career in a different country. He wanted to start a business in the tech industry and decided there was a lot more opportunity outside of Thailand. Armed with an engineering degree in one hand and his plane ticket in the other, he hopped on the first plane out of Thailand and into the Great White North. Paknan was ready to start his own business. After arriving in Canada, Paknan realized it was a lot different than home. The culture was a lot different, and he didn't quite fit in. So he tried to adapt to the Canadian culture by changing his name to Nick, a more Western name. And that's when he realized he knew nothing about Canada. To learn more about Canadian culture, Nick decided to contact a local Thai businessman to get some advice about opening a business in Canada.
In Victoria, it's very there's a lot of things involved for me in open. I'm sure there's a lot of things involved in opening up other businesses as well. But for the restaurants itself, you can't just walk into a space and oh, I'm gonna make this a restaurant. There's a lot of planning involved. There's a lot of drawing. There's a lot of steps that involve permits from the city, from the engineer himself. You need architect first of all, to draw up the plan and everything. Well, actually, at first you got to check by law if that spot is suitable for restaurants, because some spots are not suitable for restaurant, right? Wow. Then you got to need the architect to draw up the plan. Check with the city if everything's okay. In the meanwhile, you have to work with the landlord on the lease, program like, how much you want to rent, what's the length of time, and then you have to know how to negotiate. Because if you really take into the account, if you build a restaurant from the ground up, it might take 4 months. You got to work with the landlord to see if during that period can you ask for break from the rent, because otherwise if you're paying rent from the first month on with no business, that's gonna be a make or break as well, because when you start up you're very vulnerable. You don't have a lot of fun, you don't have a lot of money, and then you need permits from all sorts of departments here. Health department, if you need to sell liquor, you need liquor license, you need to do criminal record check, you need to work with a lawyer. Actually, the process, there's a lot of process, but it's not just that. You think that you plan your money for building up the restaurant, but there's money to be used in all the steps that I mentioned, and it actually takes time. You can't just walk into a department and get a signature, get a proof. There's steps involved, and it takes time.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was lucky enough that my parents support me on this. Obviously, you just graduate out from the college, and at the time in 2003, international students were not allowed to work at all. So you could only attend school. Even after you graduate, you could earn what they call postgraduate work permit. You can work for 2 to 3 years. But when you apply for a job somewhere, they look at you, you have 2 to 3 years work permit, you're not permanently staying there, right? So, understandable, most of the time they're looking for someone who can stay there for a long run. So I was fortunate enough to gather fund, to have my parents supporting me in terms of the financial support.
After talking to Ak, Nick was discouraged. he wasn't sure what to do anymore. Starting his own business is not as easy as he thought. Unsure what to do, he decided to go and get a second opinion.
So I think it's well recognized that Silicon Valley is the best technology entrepreneurial center in the world, but it's not the only one. There are Boston is another one. New York is good. There are places in Europe where they have this. British Columbia is not bad. There are 9,000 companies and 87,000 employees in the technology sector here. So it's a significant sector. And in fact, the technology here in British Columbia is larger than many of the traditional industries like forestry. So to say it's not worked, I think is wrong. So have we ever made mistakes? Oh yeah, plenty of mistakes. So I think the advice I'd have on that front, mistakes is very culturally dependent as well. So mistakes in certain countries may lead to you never being able to do business again. I think one of the strengths of California and Silicon Valley and the startup world there is that they really have a very healthy attitude to learning from mistakes and trying again. If you were to go skiing and you get on skis and you start off and you fall over and say, okay, I fell over, I'll never ski again, then it would be absolutely hopeless. You would never learn to ski. Well, business is exactly the same way. You cannot learn to ski by reading a book, and you can't learn business by doing an MBA. You've got to get out there and practice it. And you've got to make the mistakes. You've got to fall over, but you've got to get up again and try again. And then learn from those mistakes. So the ideal thing to do is to create a resume of your mistakes. So you think about how you create a resume which tells you all the wonderful things about you. Well, you keep another resume, and this is just for you, and say, here's where I made mistakes as I went along. This is what I learned from them, and this is what I should do next time. And then you can constantly improve. And if you make the same mistake more than once, you can go, oh, I have a problem here. How do I get to really overcome this particular problem? And if you keep a list of them as you go along, you can look for those systemic or systematic mistakes that you make and make sure you find ways of overcoming them. So when I was running a company called Next Phase, I've kept the list of the 9 mistakes that we made in running that company. So we took a lot of money from investors and we lost the money for those investors. So what did we do wrong along that path of making it happen? So that's why we kept that list of mistakes. And different people will make different mistakes. When we got on to running the next company, we made 2 mistakes, but they were sufficiently small that it didn't impact the outcome. We had a very successful outcome. Did we make other mistakes along the way? Of course. But these are the big mistakes that you could potentially make as a company. So yes, of course we make mistakes, but the most important thing is recording what those were, understanding them, and then saying how do we avoid them again, and recognizing it's like learning to ski. You are going to fall over, but you've got to pick yourself up and try again. Now, if you keep making the same mistake over and over again, then you don't deserve to be supported and funded. But if you learn from your mistakes and correct them, then you can be very successful.
And finally, Nick felt prepared to start his own business. He learned that making mistakes is just a part of life, and that he shouldn't be afraid to venture out on his own.